West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
It was supposed to take 3 days. Just 3 days. But after nearly 3 weeks, the big bad Russian military has yet to take Ukraine. Russian soldiers are deserting right and left. Putin has to suppress the media in his country to keep the truth from his citizens. And now he's fighting a war on two fronts, physically in Ukraine and monetarily against the world. All to restore what he thinks is the glory of the old Soviet Union? He's either crazy or crazy like a fox, a very dangerous fox. Joining me now, Washington Post columnist Max Boot and NYU history professor Ruth Ben-Ghiat, author of Strong Men, Mussolini to the Present. Thank you both very much for coming to the Sunday show. Ruth, this is your first time on with me, so I will start with you. I've been asking everybody about the potential off-ramps for Vladimir Putin to end this war. Is there really an off-ramp he would take, and would he take it because he's in too deep?
Yeah, first of all, when we talk about Putin maybe being unhinged or crazy, I don't really like to do that because it doesn't help us understand that this is part of a pattern. And when you have an autocrat who's been in power for too long, they don't listen to people anymore. And this war was, afflicted by very bad decision making. It wasn't gamed out with generals. Very few people knew about it because Putin's become more paranoid. We also see the toll of his corruption on the military. Russia's a plutocracy, and he's been siphoning, resources away from the military into his offshore accounts. So all of this has left him very vulnerable, actually, very humiliated in the eyes of the world and Russian elites who support him because he's supposed to be the defender of Russian prestige. So when you get into the state and you're obsessed with fantasies of grandeur, you think, you're at your peak, you lash out, and there isn't much of an off-ramp also because autocrats don't negotiate. They do deals with other autocrats.
That's actually a very good point. Autocrats do not negotiate. Max, I want to pick up on something that Ruth was just talking about in terms of the Russian elites. How likely is it that the Russian elites will part ways with Putin and thereby loosening his stranglehold on the country?
Well, we just don't know, Jonathan, because this is a very closed system, and Putin is the most powerful and the least transparent Russian ruler since Stalin, so we don't really know what is going on behind the scenes. I mean, I would point out that Russia has experienced revolutions in the past after losing wars in 1905 to Japan and 1917 to Germany, so it's certainly not out of the question. And after the Cuban Missile Crisis, Khrushchev was removed by the Politburo, so it's possible to imagine something along those lines happening, but we just don't know. And I don't think we can, speculate too much about what will happen with Putin in the future. I think we need to concentrate on the here and now, which is helping the the Ukrainians to defend their own territory and continuing to ramp up the sanctions to increase the pressure on Putin and to make it clear to him that this aggression will not pay.
You know, and I'm glad you brought up ramping up the sanctions on Putin, Max, because, Ruth, what I'm wondering is, because of the seeming information blackout that Putin has imposed for Russia so that Russian citizens can't see the truth of what's happening, when will those ramped up sanctions start to hit the Russian people? Have they? Do we know whether they've hit the Russian people already, and what likely would be the response to that in a country where we have already seen people protesting, those who do protest against the war in Russia, being arrested?
I think we're seeing the effects are starting to be seen. There's shortages, and also I think I think that daily life is going to become much more difficult. It's important to say that, before this war started, Putin had a 71% popularity rating, but young people were quite against Putin. And in fact, a new poll is 39% Russians aged 18 to 24 who are, more connected globally with social media are against the war. So this is going to make itself manifest in myriad ways. And one interesting point is that Putin's invested hugely for years in his personality cult, that he's invincible, he's omnipotent. And the thing in history that burst the bubble, it happened with Hitler and Mussolini, is when there's empirical evidence of their, that what they've done is having bad effects at home.
We have a minute left, and Max, Ruth, I loved it when you said you can't negotiate with an autocrat, and so therefore, Max, are the efforts at negotiations on the part of the Germans and the French with Putin, on the part of the Israeli Prime Minister with Putin, everyone trying to broker some kind of peace or get Putin to negotiate with them, are they for naught? Are those efforts a waste of time?
They're clearly not going to produce an agreement anytime soon, because Putin has to be convinced that he is not going to win this war for him to seek a true diplomatic off-ramp. And I don't think he's convinced of that yet. But at the same time, I don't think that reaching out to Putin on the part of Western leaders is a waste of time, because I think it makes sense to judge his mindset, to see where he's coming from, to communicate with him directly. I think those lines need to remain open. But I think the Biden administration is taking the right stance here by saying that the U.S. is not going to get involved until we see evidence that Putin is serious about diplomacy. And we just have not seen that evidence right now. Instead, what we're seeing is evidence that the Russians are escalating the war and are committing terrible war crimes. And we need to stand behind the Ukrainian people in their fight for freedom. And only if the Ukrainians have more success on the battlefield, and they're already having quite a bit, as they continue to have more success on the battlefield, I think then you will see Putin starting to look for a way out of what I think eventually he will see is an unwinnable war.
It is Monday, the 14th of March of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is River City Hash Mondays, because I gotta tell you, I don't like losing that hour of sleep, do you? So they call this daylight savings time, huh? How about saving my heart? My liver? How about just my circadian rhythm? Oh boy. So how are you doing? This one's hit me a lot harder than previous. Maybe it's because I'm getting old. I hope that's the reason. Actually, I abhor that is the reason. But for any other explanation, it seems worse than just getting old. So, is it perception? Am I just whining about it, so that's why it feels bad? Maybe. But I want my hour of sleep back. I can't get it back. There's no daylight savings time forgiveness. Ever. You're never getting any of those hours back. Also, when people say we have no right to complain about losing an hour, I'm not complaining about losing an hour. I'm complaining about all the hours lost for decades and decades. That's a lot of hours, okay? Never getting them back. Oh, yeah, they supposedly give it to us again in the fall, but it still doesn't work. It still messes everybody up. Jeez. All right. Are we saving time? Are we saving daylight? I don't think so. It's dark where I'm at. So, but such is life. Oh, well, actually, I do see the rays of the sun peeking over the ridge to the east, lightening up the clouds. Oh, yeah, we had a bit of rain over the weekend, so that was nice, and expecting a little bit more. We'll get into that during weather. But, yeah, I like the idea of rain falling on us rather than bombs and missiles. I hate that. Who wouldn't? So is there really a war going on in Ukraine, or is it all a figment of our imagination? All those people dying, all those buildings reduced to really just rubble. Jeez. Okay. So Vlad figured out how to hold the world at bay. And we are afraid of involving ourselves in a world war that apparently is ongoing. Because once we and others get involved in it, then it just escalates. So yeah, I guess that's the manner of things, how physics works. Add something. I don't know if it's caustic, it might be bad. On the other hand, if you don't punch the Nazi will do exactly what is happening in Ukraine right now. Yes, I know he's there to eradicate the Nazis, but he means the Jews and all of their sympathizers. I mean, it's hilarious to consider that Rasputin, Dugan, a white nationalist, is going into Ukraine to eradicate the Nazis? It's ridiculous on his face. And we have a story about how eradicating the so-called Nazis in Ukraine is really about getting rid of all the Jews there, because they're in the way, apparently. As they are in the former Soviet bloc and must be, well, shall we say, dealt with. And that is why the right wing, the white nationalists, who I call here in America Nazis, love Putin so much. If you don't punch the Nazi, this is what will happen. I keep telling everybody, you have to punch the Nazi, and then you have to punch the Nazi again. It's just the physics of the world. Okay. We've been through this before. We know exactly what will happen, but I guess we're gluttons for punishment, if one wants to use that old cliche. We must be. We seem to be doing the same thing over and over and over, like it's going to be different this time. What is that the definition of? Really? Are we going to continue doing the crazy thing when dealing with a crazy man? I think we have to be exceedingly more sane, more rational, more reasonable. So, do we escalate? Or do we only use as much force as is required to fend off the threat? If you can talk your way out of it, that's good. If you can walk away, that's good. If you can resist, that's good. If you have to fight, that's good. If you get pushed to that point. Now, I have mentioned before, my pacifism has a limit. At some point, I will, try to redirect your energy to keep you from beating the crap out of me. It's okay to do that. Putin thinks that he can just keep pounding on us and we won't redirect that energy. He is, I think he's a third-degree black belt in Taekwondo. He knows about it. But I watched him grapple a bit. He is a little top-heavy after all. Topple it over. Also, what we are seeing with the Russian military, even though they are exacting quite a bit of devastation. They are pretty much not a cohesive military unit, as one would want. And I think that that's indicative of a mob boss running a mob nation and skimming off the top from his defense budget. These things will happen. So, how do we get arms and material to the region? It looks like Vlad and his assault force have no qualms about going over borders. Look, they're already in Ukraine. But I mean, even outside of the so-called theater of war, or whatever it is that they call it, because it is a war. They have no qualms about hitting facilities that, I'm splitting hairs here. Within a mile or hundreds of yards of the border of a NATO nation, they have no qualms about, blasting some military so-called installations because people are being trained there. Or they had been trained there. Sounds sort of like how Chicago cops like to ransack apartment buildings on occasion. I wonder where Putin learned it. So, there can be all sorts of excuses. But the fact is that Putin is the aggressor. Putin went into a sovereign nation, a democratically elected sovereign nation, and said that he knows better. It's not going to stop. It's not going to stop with Ukraine. I've already heard about Moldova being on the list. Next thing you know, it's going to be Poland. Next thing you know, it's going to be Belgium. Well, probably Finland, but he might get bogged down in Finland. Yeah, you got to be careful with those Finland guys. They sweep the forests, Do they? Anyway, Putin's designs on world domination is just that. You give him something so it'll appease him? Hell no! I don't understand why that's even being mentioned. I've heard that bandied about. In fact, at the top. Give Putin something to make him go away. He is not going away. All right? I don't think there's a palace coup in the works either. And as we will see in a story at the chef's table, you could be a highly respected cleric, and your parents in Russia still won't believe you. Still won't. So, we have our work cut out for us, don't we? How do we walk that line of being tough, not getting hit in the face over and over and over, and still not turn it into a full-blown gun battle? Because, that would be bad. It would. I still think that there's ways to do or to keep this thug at bay. And, I don't know, keep him locked down. Giving up more ground is not going to work. How much more? He's already had Crimea and Georgia and all of this. Look what Russia did in Syria. I do love the fact that there's a lot of so-called anti-Zionists out there saying, the Zionists did this terrible thing in Syria. I think it was the Russians that did the terrible thing in Syria. So get me a break. Israel came to the aid of some Syrians, and now, it's the end of the world. Well, what about Russia coming to the aid of Assad? That's supposed to be good? Please. we cannot unring the bell. Putin has been in power for a considerable time. He has manipulated his judiciary. He has complete lockdown on his press. Hell, you can't even hold up a blank piece of paper without getting thrown into icebox baby gulag for 15 years. I call them icebox baby gulags because it rolls off the tongue so nice. That's what we do here. They just have gulags there that are pretty much ice boxes. Not just for babies. 15 years. You could be a supporter of the military and still be hauled off because you were talking to the press. Wow. It's almost like a science fiction story, isn't it? A simulacrum of democracy in Russia. People think they're free. Well, there's a lot of the middle class who apparently are getting out. Because they've been hit pretty bad, and not just because of our sanctions. Russia seems to work pretty good for the oligarchs and their kids, complaining about all this world terrible things that are being said about Russia, and Russia is the greatest country in the world, and Putin is the strongest leader in the world, and all these people and those terrible people that are protesting. They don't love their country while the kids are in Dubai, tweeting their patriotic jingoism. I'm a TikTok influencer. All right. I dare say we should not stop at their yachts, okay? I think we should go for their wardrobe, too. There's a lot of overpriced threads there. Dubai. That's showing your patriotism. Oh, yeah, I'm partying in Dubai while we're taking over their country. Well, I guess we still partied here when we were fighting Vietnam now, weren't we? Mm-hmm. Now, that was a proxy war. Did that start World War III? Because we shot down some MiGs then, too. Okay, I'm just saying. Russia was involved there, too, along with China. They were keeping each other at arm's length like they are now. But speaking of which, we may have put Vlad over a barrel as he runs to the arms of China. Because I got to say, Xi is a lot smarter than Putin, a lot more practical, which is scary. So we'll see how it shakes out. I think some of China's silence has been boding not well for Vlad, but remains to be seen. It just remains to be seen. Well, at the same time, let's not sit back and watch it happen. And, like I said, we got our work cut out for us on the world stage, and we have people just as stupid and brainwashed here. Unbelievable. Speaking of which, did you see that Carrie Lake clip from Australia's 60 Minutes? Where she goes, Australia is such a terrible country. You've lost all your freedoms because you melted down your guns. What a crazy woman. Boy, she is like unfriendly. She is caustic. Oh my God, no wonder Trump likes her. What an unfriendly, oh God. And people are going to vote for her because she's tough. Yeah, she's tough, all right. Okay, so we got the Carrie Lakes in the world running for office, and there's a lot of people out there voting for them, and I'm not letting them off. They are whole participants in this. And we're supposed to just say, oh, well, they're entitled to their opinions. Well, their opinions are wholly unformed, predicated upon an uneducated assumption. No. No, they don't get away with it. We're supposed to be the evil ones, our totalitarianism of free speech and free press. Oh, they're totalitarian. And then we get to hear Trump going off about how he's going to fire every civil servant because the deep state must be brought to heel. F you, Trump. You know, you would expect a mobster to try to get rid of the civil service and put in a spoil system, wouldn't you? Jesus. And his people go, oh, yeah, that's great. Let's do it. Yeah, well, you lived under a spoil system and you didn't like it. What makes this guy different? Oh, you've been convinced somehow, haven't you? As in what we like to call brainwashing now. Why is it that the uneducated rural citizen in Russia has the same amount of idiocy and brainwashing as ours do? Well, there's a word for it, and I just said it, brainwashing. And does brainwashing work? I think we're seeing the results of that experiment because it's been put into action, and 70 some odd million people have no qualms about, I don't know, arresting our mayors and handing them over to Vlad. That could happen, and we have to stop it. Punch the Nazis, and then you got to punch the Nazis again. And I don't mean physically go up to somebody who you think is a Nazi and physically assault them. I am talking about punch them in their pocketbooks, punch them in their national or their GDP. There's all sorts of ways to punch a Nazi. We're doing it right now. Well, we do have a curated show, of course, as you know, and we might as well let you know what that is. Well, at the top, when looking for an off-ramp for Putin, it is important to remember there is not much of an off-ramp because autocrats do not negotiate. They don't. They do what they want to do. Like I said, don't negotiate with a Nazi. You have to punch him. On the rest of the menu, the West Virginia Legislature's Republican supermajority failed to pass a controversial bill restricting how race is taught in public schools because they missed a midnight deadline. Well, I expect them to just disregard that because that's how supermajorities of Republicans work. But for now, they've been brought to heel. Congress renewed the landmark Violence Against Women Act nearly 3 years after Trump partisans caused it to lapse. And Nantucket shops are scrambling after United Parcel Service missed the priority window for ferry bookings of large trucks to the island for the whole year. Oops. The person who just got hired to handle that, I think, is out of a job. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Ukraine's only woman rabbi is among the many Jews Putin has called a Nazi who are fleeing the war. And AirSerbia will go back to one flight a day to Moscow, following criticism that the carrier is busting a European Union-wide ban on flights to Russia and profiting from the war in Ukraine. You would think if there was a European Union-wide ban on flights, they wouldn't be allowed even one flight in. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link across the page, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could possibly afford what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, even in these times of peril and woe, if you could send those funds our way once a month, it really helps us pay our bills. Now, I know we're in times of peril and woe, and you can only do what you can do, and some people have had to pull back, and that's okay. All right? We'll carry on, but I guess I shouldn't be so proud to let you know that we do need help, as I guess and suppose that we all do. But if you could afford to help us out once a month and send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, it does allow us to pay our bills and fly under the radar, continuing this resistance against dark forces arrayed against not only the United States of America, but representative democracy worldwide. And thank you for your generosity, and that is truly sincere. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime. And then I scramble to get that posted up on Twitter and other social media platforms. Of course, as you know, the show notes and links are where you can find the real reportage of the offerings that we offer. Indeed. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. And, of course, the Netroots Radio Library, in which West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is part of as well, can be found on the Internet Archive, the Deep Archive, on the Internet Archive at archive.org. Okay, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the Associated Press by Leah Willingham. The West Virginia Legislature's Republican supermajority failed to pass a controversial bill restricting how race is taught in public schools because they missed a midnight deadline in the final moments of the 2022 session. A state Senate spokesperson confirmed early on Sunday. That was yesterday. Lawmakers had spent weeks during the legislative session debating and advancing proposed bills similar to the Anti-Racism Act of 2022. It was not immediately clear why Republicans waited until late Saturday to take the final vote. The act had passed the Senate and House overwhelmingly, and the late-night vote was merely to greenlight the House's version. We took the vote, but essentially that didn't matter because it didn't make the deadline, Senate spokesperson Jacques Bland told the Associated Press. Bland. Yeah, that's a nice name for a spokesperson. She said, or Jackie, okay. Jackie Bland. She said the education bill has no path forward to becoming law. Well, a separate bill restricting abortion access did pass just minutes before midnight. It bars parents from seeking abortion care because they believe their child will be born with a disability. It provides exemptions in the case of a medical emergency or in cases where a fetus is non-medically viable, but that'll be changed because they're trying to kill women who have ectopic pregnancies right now. You have to die, lady. GOP lawmakers appeared unhurried as the clock ticked down on Saturday, spending about an hour passing resolutions honoring two outgoing senators. Supporters of the Anti-Racism Act of 2022 said it aims to prevent discrimination based on race in K-12 public schools, banning teachers from telling students that one race is inherently racist or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously. The bill said students cannot be taught a person's moral character is determined by their race, or that a person by virtue of their race bears responsibility for actions committed by other members of the same race. You think that you're not responsible for what your family does? Yeah, try that in the marketplace of ideas. Anusha Miri of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Congress has renewed a 1990s-era law that extends protection to victims of domestic and sexual violence, updating the landmark Violence Against Women Act nearly 3 years after partisan disagreements caused it to lapse. That's a nice way of saying that partisan Republicans of Trump's ilk allowed it to lapse and fought the Democrats every step of the way. Okay, it's just easier to say it was both sides, apparently. It passed this week as part of the $1.5 trillion government funding package and capped years of work by members of the House and Senate. It is certain to win the signature of President Joe Biden, who worked on the law during his days in the Senate. Passage of the legislation brought a rare moment of bipartisan agreement in the Congress, achieved partly on the strength of the personal connections that lawmakers have to domestic violence and its devastating effects. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, who first helped write and pass the original bill as a House member in 1994, called it one of the most important laws passed by Congress in the last 30 years. Yet, the reauthorization of the law, which aims to reduce domestic and sexual violence and improve the response to it through a variety of grant programs, almost did not happen. The sticking point was a provision in the last proposal passed by the House in April of 2019 that would have prohibited persons previously convicted of misdemeanor stalking from possessing firearms. That seems reasonable, doesn't it? Under current federal law, those convicted of domestic abuse can lose their guns if they are currently or formerly married to the victim, live with the victim, have a child together, or are a victim's parent or guardian. But the law does not apply to stalkers and current or former dating partners. Advocates have long referred to it as the boyfriend loophole. But expanding the restrictions drew fierce opposition from the Russian-compromised NRA and their equally Russian-compromised Republicans in Congress, creating an impasse. This time, Democrats backed down and did not include the provision, but lawmakers like Jackson Lee said they are not giving up. Well, thanks. In the 3 years since the Violence Against Women Act was last authorized, members of Congress, advocates, and even Angelina Jolie worked to not only reauthorize the law, but to modernize and update it. The new version includes protections for Native American, transgender, and immigrant women that had been lacking. Associated Press staff bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Shops on Nantucket that rely on UPS to bring their goods to the tiny island are bracing for trouble after the shipping company failed to make ferry reservations for its trucks this summer. The company missed the priority window to make reservations this year, and by the time it came to light, ferries were close to full capacity for large trucks. A spokesperson for UPS said it's working to find other transportation to ensure packages are delivered on time, but some stores fear the error could end up slowing their business during the busiest time of the year. It's not sharks, though it kind of is. UPS is the largest carrier of standard deliveries to the wealthy island community, and it typically files ferry requests months in advance along with other freight shippers. Many Nantucket stores rely on it to get clothes, TV, hardware, and other goods they sell to residents and summer visitors. Is going to put us in a world of hurt. Shantae Blois, business manager at the Nantucket Chamber of Commerce, said. It was not immediately clear what led to the error, which was first reported by Nantucket magazine, but I bet is from a new hire, and I feel sorry for them. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You were listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, who's your baddie? Warning, thematic spoilers. Okay, so The Batman, directed by Matt Reeves, who did Cloverfield and 2 Planet of the Apes, co-written by Peter Craig, who wrote Bad Boys for Life and both Mockingjays. I should also mention director of photography Greg Fraser, who is straight off of Dune, and supervising art director Grant Armstrong, who most recently designed Spider-Man Far From Home, because, oh boy, does this movie look good. Early on, Bruce Wayne says the criminals think he's hiding in the shadows, but they're wrong, because he is the shadows. Go Craig and Reeves, archetypal Batman line. And yeah, never has Gotham been more dark, or more wet, but even nightly rains can't wash away the grime, or the crime. Never has Gotham felt so overwhelming, like it's too much for one vigilante to handle. Speaking of which, Robert Pattinson gives us a gaunt, goth-haunted, overtaxed Bruce Wayne 2 years into his war to clean up the city. We learn he's burning through money and doesn't care because now we finally hate the rich, and the film needs Wayne to not be the Jeff Bezos of crime fighting. No more mansion and cave. Bruce and Alfred are based in Wayne Tower in the city. Also, Batman works with the cops more than in any previous film because even though Gotham is all about bad cops and corruption, we have to show that there are good cops too. At least it means they don't underuse Jeffrey Wright as Gordon. Paul Dano, they've transformed the Riddler into a fringe loony serial killer. The Batsuit is like Kevlar on steroids. The Batmobile looks and sounds like Satan's muscle car. Everything was going so well when the giant penny drops to reveal it's all one big daddy story. You see, originally Bruce Wayne horrifically lost his parents, causing him to devote his life and fortune to a war on crime. But over the past few decades, it's been changed to Bruce Wayne having lost his father. Oh, and that chick who wore the pearls and furs Dad bought for her. And so also in The Batman. Oh, guys, and it is almost all guys behind this film. So close, and still the same lame. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
As the days get longer and the weather warms, people of all ages will start to spring into action. Spring is a great time to breathe fresh air, stretch your arms and legs, and get physically active outdoors. Lack of physical activity contributes to obesity, heart disease, stroke, and other chronic health conditions. Fortunately, many communities are making it easier and safer to be physically active. Neighborhoods across the country are working together to create more public spaces for walking, running, biking, and other physical activities. Adults should get at least 150 minutes of physical activity each week, and children should get 60 minutes a day. If you find it hard to walk to a local recreation center, park, or playground, learn how to make your neighborhood a place that makes healthy living easier. Visit makinghealtheasier.org for information about ways communities can change to get more people outside and moving.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. We are joined today once again by Mina Bose, the Peter S. Calico Chair in Presidential Studies and Executive Dean for Public Policy and Public Service Programs at Hofstra University. Professor Bose, tell us about the democratic norm of civic participation.
Civic participation undergirds American democracy and indeed is what makes American democracy thrive. We expect that the American public has a responsibility to be engaged in politics, whether nationally, at the state level, or locally. We have elected officials to govern on our behalf, but we expect them to be responsive to our interests and indeed be guided by public concerns and interests.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bose. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
The 2022 election returns are rolling in from Nashville, Tennessee. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The city of Nashville has had a seat in the United States House of Representatives for as long as Tennessee has been a state, that is, for 147 years. But no longer. Tennessee Governor Bill Lee recently signed into law a new political map drawn up by his fellow Republicans in the state legislature. That map destroys Nashville's seat in Congress by splicing and dicing that city's voters into 3 adjoining rural conservative Republican districts. That newly gerrymandered map does 4 things. First, it destroys the congressional district's community of interest, which Nashville voters share with each other, but not with the rural voters. Second, it ensures that Nashville's voters will essentially be irrelevant in their new districts. Third, it eviscerates the voting power of black voters and guarantees their votes back of the bus status. And fourth, it guarantees that Democrats will lose and Republicans will win another seat in the House of Representatives. What's most disturbing is that what's happening in Tennessee and to Nashville is not the exception, but rather the rule, because the Supreme Court in 2019, 5-4, ruled that federal courts may not in any way remedy the democracy-killing manipulation of partisan gerrymandering. And so, now we witness democracy being destroyed, one gerrymandered district at a time. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
Hunters have come up with euphemisms to make what they do sound, well, less unpleasant. For example, animals aren't killed, they're harvested. Corporate America is now adopting this verbal ploy, for CEOs urgently need to soften the image of their constant hunt for ways to kill jobs. Their urgency is that they're now pushing a huge new surge in cuts, this time targeting college-educated, white-collar professionals. Their weapon is the same sort of neutron bomb they've used to dispatch millions of blue-collar workers, robots. But robot is a negative term, so it's been replaced with a nondescript acronym, RPAs, Robotic Process Automation. These sophisticated automatons are armed with artificial intelligence, enabling them to take over cognitive work that had been the niche of such highly paid humans as financial analysts, lawyers, engineers, managers, doctors. More than just an incremental extension of a long, slow automation process, this is a big bang. It's presently ripping through the workforce at warp speed, and most of America's vulnerable employees have no idea of what's coming. In a survey of corporate executives last year, nearly 80% of them had already put some forms of RPA in place, with an additional 16% planning to do so within 3 years. McKinsey, the world's biggest corporate strategy consultant, calculates that these thinking robots will displace 45 million U.S. workers in this decade. This is Jim Hightower saying, returning to the hunting analogy, professional jobs requiring human-level judgment have been presumed to be beyond the range of robotic firepower. But as one labor economist now notes, with the mass deployment of RPA technology, that type of work is much more in the kill path.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1954, marking the opening of the powerful labor film Salt of the Earth. Salt of the Earth told the story of striking Chicano miner members of the International Union of Mine, Mill, and Smelter Workers, Local 890, against the Empire Zinc Mine in New Mexico. The three filmmakers had been blacklisted by Hollywood because they were accused of holding communist sympathies and because they refused to testify before the House Un-American Committee of Congress. The filmmakers had difficulty finding actors willing to star in their film. Undeterred, they enlisted a handful of actors and then cast members of Local 890 in the rest of the roles. They also met with community members to discuss the script. The result was a moving testament to the power of workers and community. The film depicts how the women of the community took up the role of picketers after the courts had barred the union men from demonstrations. But not everyone was pleased that this story was being told. Local media began railing against the film. Congressman Donald Jackson of California called the film a new weapon for Russia. Soon, protesters began to show up to disrupt the filming. Someone shot at one of the actors' cars. Fortunately, he was not in it at the time. After filming ended, the problems continued. Editing studios refused to touch the controversial film. Few movie houses would show it. The film did, however, find acclaim abroad, especially in Mexico and France. 2014 marked the film's 60th anniversary, and several special screenings took place from New Mexico to New York. This incredible worker story is finally receiving the attention that it deserves. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 41 degrees Fahrenheit with rain showers and occurring right now with overcast skies during the afternoon hours. Highs will be around 62, and we're expecting, a little bit, about a 15th of an inch, if that makes sense. But tonight, we are expecting lows of 45 with about a half an inch of rain occurring overnight, and winds will be light and variable. Lows, did I say, about 45? Rain showers early tomorrow with highs in about 57 in the afternoon with some sunshine later in the day. Winds will be out of the west-southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and it will bring rain tomorrow, about a quarter of an inch. And we had a bit of wind and rain over the weekend, as I had reported earlier. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County continue to rise, even though everybody is taking off their mask. Not me. We now stand at 423,056 individuals confirmed as infected with coronavirus, and our deceased have increased as well. We now stand at 500 dead. And we're taking off our masks. Not me. Pollen is rated as none outside the window in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 25 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is moderate at level 3. We're going to skip right into weather from around the world. And weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 54 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 60 and fair. Rome is 64 and fair. Kyiv is 43 and sunny, which means, I guess, a lot of bomb sorties coming through now. Kabul is 56 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 68 and clear. Tokyo is 48 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 70 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 46 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York is 44 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Vanessa Guerra of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. On her first Shabbat away from the fighting in Ukraine, Rabbi Julia Gries twice led services to welcome the Jewish holy day. A week earlier, Ukraine's only woman rabbi had been fleeing the war that scattered her Odessa congregation from Moldova to Romania to Israel. Some stayed behind, braving the Russian shelling. She first led an online service for those congregants scattered abroad. Then she officiated one in person for a small group in Poland, taken in by a Christian couple near Warsaw. Gries lit Sabbath candles that she had carried from Ukraine, while her 19-year-old daughter, Isolda, played the guitar and sang, just as she had during services back home in her Reformed community. There were so many stories, so much crying, and so much pain, Gries said, for those who are here, and even more so for those still in Ukraine. Gries and her daughter found safety after a 20-mile walk, lugging suitcases and their 2 cats, reaching the border with Poland, where they negotiated a 40-hour wait without food, water, or toilets. The mother and daughter are part of the exodus from Ukraine that has become the fastest-growing humanitarian crisis in Europe since World War II. With some 200,000 Jews in Ukraine, one of the world's largest Jewish communities, it is inevitable that many Jewish people are also among those fleeing. The reality that so many Jews have joined the mass civilian exit from Ukraine exposes the deceitfulness of Russian claims that it's there to denazify Ukraine. In truth, Ukraine has steadily grown into a pluralistic society led by a Jewish president, Zelensky. Gries said she always felt very much at home in Ukraine, a Russian-born Jew who had never felt discrimination there, unlike in Russia. Now Russia's invasion has plunged the country into an acute humanitarian crisis affecting Jews and non-Jews alike.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Associated Press staff bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. AirSerbia will go back to one flight a day to Moscow, the Serbian president said, following criticism that the country's national carrier is busting a European-wide ban on flights to Russia and profiting from the war in Ukraine. Since the Russian invasion started over 2 weeks ago, AirSerbia has doubled the number of flights to the Russian capital and introduced larger aircraft to increase the number of seats for what has become its most profitable destination. Besides some Turkish carriers, Serbia Airline is the only European company that has kept on flying to Russia since the international flight ban was announced. That triggered criticism from both the EU and Ukraine. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.